Okay. So there is a little line on your notes over here next to Free State. That's right. I'm over here with quarter. No, that was right. That was one. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, comma. So we have to make sure that we write the comma in for that Second Amendment, because a comma and a period or a semicolon changes the meaning of the Second Amendment. It's one of those moments in time where we look at punctuation, we tend to blow it off, okay, whatever. In this situation, it totally can adjust the meaning of the Second Amendment. Right, so the first one, Second Amendment was ratified in 1791. This is the right to bear arms. The very first part, as we look at it, is a statement regarding the militia. Right, so if we read it, the very first part is a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. If I have a period there, what changes? You put a period in a statement, what does that do to the statement? Simply ends it. I'm done, right? So if this said a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, period. If that was the case, what would the entire Second Amendment be focused on? Because if we do a paragraph or a statement, what's the following statements after the first one? Think about when you guys develop your paragraphs. Thesis statement, and then what are the other statements below? You guys didn't realize we were going to do English in government class, did you? You've heard of supporting statements, or the body, the explanation of what you theorize or your thesis was. But because there is a comma, it doesn't stop. It's a continuation of the thought, right? Also, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. This is a huge one for slippery slope. Who in here does hunt? Okay, so you guys, I imagine, have weapons at the house. Okay, does anybody here have a handgun at their home? Okay, does anybody in here know anyone in their family or them? I wouldn't be you guys. Anyone in your family that has a concealed carry? Okay, all right. So all of that becomes an interesting discussion, right? When we talk about this one, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. So for the state's purposes, we have a well-regulated militia. What is that called in the state of Ohio? National Guard. Right, so in Ohio, in Pennsylvania, in Washington, D.C., anywhere around the country, we need something to happen, or we need the military to step in. We call it the National Guard. The governor of Ohio has access to the National Guard, can send them wherever he chooses to. Matter of fact, the National Guard at the inauguration, does anybody know who technically brought in the National Guard first? The mayor of Washington, D.C. Because it's its own district, they have a little more ability to do that, and then president like Biden and the military volunteered those services as well, right? But it was the Washington, D.C. mayor that started that. The state of Ohio controls the National Guard. Can the president overrule the governors of the states? Yes. Right, so the National Guard, I'll give you guys a good example. When they were trying to bring the black students into the schools in Arkansas, the National Guard was brought in to stop them from going into the schools. The president told the National Guard, no, you need to help them get into the school. So he basically overrode the governor. But going back to this, the militia is a state entity. So that's where that comes from. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Would you guys agree that it's the type of weapons that is the argument or the discussion? So you would say, no, that's not the discussion.
Every year changes. One new gun
I think the weapons are. I mean, the debate that I hear about isn't so much the right to bear arms; it was what arms you want to bear. But this is the slippery slope. Because if I take away that gun, what's to stop me from taking away that gun, and that gun, and that gun? I think the big argument that I keep on hearing about the Second Amendment is the mental status. Matter of fact, that came up in school discussion. There's a big discussion we've had. Well, you guys all know about ALICE training, right? You guys have heard of ALICE training? So at the school, we go through this every couple of years. And one of the questions that came up a while back was, can we arm the teachers? One of our former military teachers said, hey, I'm former Army. Will you let the teachers have weapons? At the time, the old superintendent said, well, we'll come back and revisit that. We never revisited it. Because it was a hard no from the superintendent. The argument that the sheriff said to us was the only problem with arming teachers, if you're former military, doesn't mean you're trained like a police officer. If you criminal justice probably talks a little bit more about this than other classes, of course. But a police officer is trained to go towards and to pick specific targets, whereas in the military, you kind of like aim that way and just keep shooting. So different training completely. But then the big question came about psychology of teachers. What if I'm a crazy teacher and I have access to a gun? Think of the potential ramifications of a crazy teacher with a gun. And you guys probably on your hand figure out 3 or 4 people that you would want to not have access to a gun that you know of that are teachers. You're like, and that's a no, and that's a no, and that's a no. Right. The other discussion we had, and this is actually one of the things that came up was we said, well, what if we did like every month I'd have to go to physical training at like with Officer Schneider at a shooting range twice a month to make sure that we're accurate. And then the other thing that came up was psychological testing every month, like to kind of review the teachers to make sure that they're okay. So that became a discussion. But I know even outside of the school, the big issue that we're running into now is the background checks or the psychological background of people that are getting the military, the weapons. Let me just open this up. What are your thoughts? There's all sorts of ramifications or different ideas or thoughts. And again, this is one of those moments where if you agree, great. If you disagree, you're more than welcome to. You can have a good discussion. Yeah.
I believe guns help our freedom.
Okay, so you're stating that right there provides us with the ability to make sure we stay free from the government. Okay, so the fear that you have is that if the government gets too powerful, you'd be able to protect yourself.
Yeah.
Okay. And you also have a different thought process or a different reason for owning a weapon. I have a handgun in my house. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say I kind of feel the same as Corey.
Okay.
I feel like we should probably have them as protection, and we use them if we need them.
Okay.
And if we don't, we don't.
Then we just they're
Yeah.
Who in here? I do this all the time. Are all my Brunswick people at the PSAT today? I think so. Are you Brunswick? Okay. So I know that there was near my neighborhood car theft. Someone had broken into somebody's garage, and I was on the process of thinking about purchasing a gun. But the moment I heard that was the moment I went, I have to have something because I don't have an alarm system in my house. I thought, okay, so I have a handgun in my house. I don't have my concealed carry yet, but in my mind, I understand the protection thing from the government. But I started focusing on just my protection in my home. I think the problem we run into is when those weapons leave the home and are used for other purposes. The sad part, this is one of those moments in life when we look at all of the events that we've gone through over the past 10 years with the different shootings and the reason we have an ALICE training. Sadly, those are the ones we hear about. We don't really hear about the other incidences where the person who had the handgun stopped the robbery or stopped the person from being kidnapped or stopped something from happening. So this one, I don't think is ever going to go away. But the key here that we're looking at, and this is actually something we're going to get into the Fifth Amendment, the problem that we run into with this one in the United States, are you guilty until proven innocent or innocent until proven guilty? It's supposed to be innocent until proven guilty, according to the Constitution, according to the law. Right? So if I tell you you can't have a weapon and then I do a background check, what are they assuming? No, you cannot have this weapon until your background check is done. Are they assuming you're guilty first, or are they assuming you're innocent first? And technically, they're assuming you're guilty, and then they're going to prove you're innocent later on. So it's kind of an interesting little flip on that one when you put too many regulations on it. Most people, I would imagine anyone who here has a weapon, has done the background check. Like, I was actually really surprised how fast mine went. What they did was when I went and got my gun, I gave them my name, my birth dates, a couple other pieces of information, and they sent it to the FBI essentially. I think it's the FBI. Yeah. And the FBI searches for my name. If they can't find my name, then they go, it's clear, because he's not in the system. There's no record. There's no nothing. Nothing with Jeffrey Michael Hollow from is in our system. So I told the guy this information, and I want to say a minute later, maybe two, he was like, all right, you're clear, you're good to go. And I asked him, I was like, how is it that fast? Because my brother-in-law, he said he did his, and it took him a half an hour for the results to get back. And the guy who's responsible is, well, sometimes they're super busy, sometimes they're not, and there's people there. He's like, this guy was there and ready to go. So that was one. He said, plus, they'll look for any variation on the name Jeffrey Michael Hollow. So if there's a Jeffrey Michael Hallow somewhere in Ohio that has a record, then they'll go back through to make sure and see whether is that a different person, and then they'll clear it after that. So it's not very long. There are certain weapons I think you do have to go through a little bit longer process to get some weapons. And this was something that happened that made me think about this discussion the other day with my dad, because I was talking about the robberies in my neighborhood, and I was at my mom and dad's house, and my dad's like, well, I got a Glock that I'm not using, so why don't you take my Glock? You didn't have it. And I was like, okay, I took it, and then as I'm driving home with my dad's Glock in the car with ammunition, not in it, not loaded, it was separate. And that's actually, for those who don't know, you have to have it separated while you're in a vehicle. If you have a concealed carry, there's all sorts of little regulations that go along with that. But all of that, when I got to my house, I thought, wait, I have no insurance. This is not on my, this is kind of sketchy. So I ended up taking it back to my dad's house. Like, no, I'll just get my own. It's registered to me. And that's, I think, the problem we run into is people are getting guns from whoever. One of the other issues that came up was mom or dad buying you a weapon for your birthday. That's relatively common in families that hunt or have like a rifle to rifle, or hey, this has been my rifle for years. I'm giving it to you. There's no registration change. So there's all sorts of little things that you guys are going to hear of over the years. All right. Questions or concerns about the Second Amendment? All right. Third Amendment. Quartering of troops. No soldier shall, in time of peace, be quartered in any house without the consent of the owner, nor in time of war, but in the manner to be prescribed by law. So for this one, again, if we go back historically, this is actually where this came from, was the idea that the soldiers were coming in and literally living in people's houses. So there was no barracks, there was no military place for them to go. The British would come in, you guys were part of the British Army, you'd come to my house, and you wouldn't even have to ask for permission. You just come in and be like, my soldier's staying right there. And then I would go down to the next house, and I would put 2 soldiers in the next house, and 2 soldiers in the next house. And everybody lived in the area, and the families had to take care of them. They had to feed them, they had to clothe them, they had to clean their clothes. I mean, it was like, it wasn't just staying in your house, it was living in your house and having whoever owned the house do all these things for them. But again, this was in time of peace. In time of peace. So in time of war, however, it potentially could take over. But even that, without nor in the time of war, but in the manner to be prescribed by law. So the Congress probably gave more rules. There's a lot more regulations saying what you can and cannot do, whose house you can and cannot take. All of this actually led to, who in here ever heard of the March to the Sherman's March during the Civil War? For those who haven't heard, what do you remember about it? Yeah, about a mile. I think it was like 5 miles or 10 miles wide. Just as they marched, they burnt, and it was almost kind of like a excuse my language. Screw you, South. You did some stuff, and now we're going to make you pay for this. And they just started burning and burning and burning. They came to Savannah, Georgia. Has anybody been to Savannah, Georgia? It's beautiful, old school. I'm not sure where you were in Savannah, Georgia, but there's some really nice, beautiful, old architecture. Because what happened was the mayor of Savannah, Georgia, knew Sherman was coming this way and burning everything, so he went out and met him and said, "Hey, listen, come visit. We'll feed you. We'll take care of you." So he kind of like preempted the quartering of troops thing and said, "We'll put you up in all of our hotels and our houses. We'll take care of you. Just don't burn us down." Which is why Savannah still has a lot of its old buildings, old culture from pre-Civil War times because of that. All right. Okay. This is the one that has lots of fun little implications, little issues, questions that may pop up. That are my, excuse my language, hypothetical questions. Like, my friends, okay. I had a girl years ago. We were actually at Judge Collier here, and he was speaking to the classes, and the question, one of the girls said, "I collect bonds." And the judge was like, "Oh, okay, you collect bonds." And then she went through the whole process of, if I and this and yada, yada, yada. And so the judge was very, very humorous with her because she hadn't done anything illegal. He was like, started talking to her about, so for all those people who collect bonds, and then there's another girl that was, let's say, this happened to this girl in a bar. I found out later on when she graduated, she told me, I kind of knew that this was real, but she said, okay, so let's say I'm in a bar and I'm underage, and a police officer who's undercover buys me a drink, and I take the drink. Am I in trouble, or is that entrapment? And the judge looked at her and said, so your friend, was she old enough to be in the bar? And of course, it went through the whole scenario. In the end, it was not entrapment because, one, it was underage drinking. And there was another thing that he used, I can't remember what it was, but the hypothetical situations. All right, so the very, very first thing I want to go over with you guys is the very first section of this. I'm going to stop it because if I go too far, I lose my train of thought. The right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects. So we just stop for just a moment. Think of everything that covers. The right of the people to be secure, safe, in their persons, in myself, in their persons, me, right? Their houses, the physical structures where I'm living, could be mobile home, could be a camper, could be your car, right? Papers, your effects, or your papers, your documents, any of those things. Your birth certificate, your passport, and effects. Now think about the word effects. What does that mean? Is it specific or is it generic? I'll leave it there. Generic. Thank you. It's a 50-50 chance. You got it right. Nice stuff. Right? It's generic. It's very open-ended, right? So we got persons, your individual self. Matter of fact, when we look at the Roe v. Wade, the court case that deals with abortion, one of the things they cite is the Fourth Amendment, the right of the people to be secure in their persons. This is your person. This is your security. You can do with your person what you want to do with your person. And so, have you ever heard people make the comment, "My body, my choice," revolves back to the Fourth Amendment. Your personhood. That is your person. You can do with it what you want. Now, this is where we get into the next part. Against unreasonable searches and seizures. Pause. Unreasonable searches and seizures. Can I search and seize stuff? Yes, I can. It has to be reasonable though. There's a way to get there. Does anybody know what the way to get to reasonable searches would be?
I don't know, but what is it?
Michael, you all right over there? I know. Okay. For me to find reasonable, there's something that we call reasonable suspicion that leads to probable cause. So if I were to have Officer Schneider come up here, he is bound by probable cause. He cannot move forward as a police officer until you have probable cause. How do you get to probable cause? This is where we talk about reasonable suspicion. Right? So let's say that I am at a speedway as a police officer. I pulled in, I'm about to get myself something to drink, and I see this guy run out of the store, jumps into his car, backs up real fast, speeds over, goes over a bump, like he's still going the speed limit, but like taking off was like, what's going on here? As a police officer, my brain goes, I should probably check this out. Just try to follow it. Reasonable suspicion. Something's not right. I don't know what's happening. I don't know. I have no probable cause yet. He just really ran out fast, jumped the curb. Reasonable suspicion. We follow. About a minute later, you hear a call over the radio saying, white male, age between 20 and 30, exiting Speedway on the corner of yada yada yada. Rob, and then it goes through like some of whatever he had done. Now, reasonable suspicion. I'm following this guy that just left that Speedway that I was just heard on the radio, and it describes that he did this, and this. Does that now give me probable cause to pull him over? Yes. Right. Reasonable suspicion is a probable cause. So we go back up here, unreasonable searches and seizures. If I pull you over, and let's say that this situation happens, I pull you over, and I was told that you held up the Speedway at gunpoint, and that you took $5,000 worth of cash. Okay? I pull you over. Is it reasonable for me to be able to search and seize things in your vehicle? Right? You match the description. You left the same place 30 seconds to a minute prior to me getting the radio call. You have a gun, potentially, I don't know. You have a gun because that person stole $5,000. If I bring you out of the car, what would I most likely do if I had a person with an actual weapon in their car? Criminal justice people. What do you think I would probably have to do? What's that? If I can, right? But what am I nervous about with someone who has a potential weapon because they just robbed the store at gunpoint? I don't want to get shot. So will I call for backup? Most likely I'll have people, maybe 2 or 3 people, come help me out, just to back me up as I approach the vehicle, right? Once I do get you out of the car, so let's say I get you out of the car, and you do not have the weapon on you, you don't have the cash on you. Where would I be able to search for a gun and $5,000 worth of cash in a vehicle? Start naming off places that stuff would fit. Spare tire lock. Where else? Glove box.
Behind the radio?
I pull the radio, put it in there, but behind the radio, yeah.
Under the seats.
On the seat, for sure. What's that? In the seat. If I had time, if maybe 5 minutes has gone by, I could have figured out a way to get in the seat, sure. Okay. What else would be reasonable? Yeah.
Center console.
What's that?
Center console.
Center console? Okay. How about the, yeah. A little pocket there. Would it be prudent to potentially maybe even have the ability to pop off the side of the door and look inside the door frame? That we're on the edge now, right? Because in the moment from the time I came up behind you and pulled you over, would you have had time to get it in there? Okay. How about the trunk? Would the trunk be a reasonable searching place? Could be. How would let's say you guys go to court. I searched your trunk and I found a ton of weapons and I found all sorts of stuff outside of the gun and the money that you guys had stolen or you had stolen. What would be potentially your argument against the search of my trunk, saying that that was unreasonable? Yeah.
Like if they were driving.
Yeah. How did I get the gun and the cash in the trunk if it was just you and you're in this car and there's no access to the trunk from the inside of the car? That would be an argument, right? So unreasonable. Here's another one. I'll give you guys this one because it's actually who in here to watch Law and Order? It's probably the best one to watch in regards to law stuff. Let's say that you held up, or let's say you went to your neighbor's house and because of loud noises, you brought a shotgun and you went to the front door and you basically pointed at them and said, "You better shut up or I'm gonna blow you guys away." Right? That was a threat of violence. Of course, you don't do it. Good. You go home and the police show up and say, "Hey, listen, we hear that you approached the neighbor with a rifle. We need to search your house for this rifle." Whatever the process is, they go through it the correct way. Where would they be allowed to search for a rifle? Yeah.
Closets in big areas.
Closets, big areas being the key word. If I started flipping through makeup containers and purses and drawers that are like small, right? Would that be unreasonable? Yeah, I'm looking for a rifle. I gotta look where a rifle would fit. Maybe floorboards, checking for some creepy floorboards. I can check that way, right? So when we look about unreasonable search and seizures, a lot of the stuff comes back to practicality. Is it practical? Would it fit in there? If I was looking for drugs, you could fit drugs pretty much anywhere else, right? So I could find and dig and pull out and reach for and go through behind and go inside the doors and all sorts of stuff, especially if time has gone by. If I'm searching a house for drugs, there's so many thousands upon thousands of places. I'll have to have Mr. Barry talked with you guys about his search and seizure of the guy's house where he went up into the attic, right? That was a good one. That was so he said the guy was like okay with most of the search of the house, and as he got closer to this like crawl space, he said the guy started getting like nervous and antsy, and then he got closer, and the guy's like, "Yeah, go ahead, search wherever you want to." And he's like, "So if I go up here, I'm not gonna find anything." Correct me if I'm wrong. What else happened with that one? Was he like went up a ladder, didn't he? Like or something like that on a chair to look up there, and then when he got up there. Did the guy freak out or something like that? I can't remember the rest of the story.
You like when they're there and the guy started like getting antsy and nervous.
Okay. And then of course, at that point, he went up in the attic and he found, didn't he find like a ton?
Yeah.
It wasn't just a small amount, it was like this massive amount. And that was the thing too. Unreasonable search and seizure sometimes leads to inevitable fines. So I was only looking for a small baggie of these illegal drugs, but I just found all of that. I'll give you guys another good story. This one happened. There's two good ones. I'll start with the one that was actually more local for you guys. Who in here knows? Who in here is a Claggett person? Claggett. Okay, so this one affects you guys. Well, it doesn't affect you, but it happened to a former special ed teacher at Claggett Middle School. Her husband decided one day to become an entrepreneur and grow weed in their basement. So he built up this whole huge growing system in the basement, had exhaust fans going out the basement. All of it looked normal from the outside. The way he had bought the stuff was through his wife's credit card. And that was how she got arrested, because she was complicit in the crime because she allowed him to use the credit card to purchase the stuff to make the marijuana. Now, how did they find the marijuana? This is the fun story. In her neighborhood where she lived up in North Olmsted, there had been a series of robberies in the neighborhood, right? So people had been breaking into houses. a neighbor noticed across the street where this teacher and her husband lived, and they had a small little baby, that the door was a little open. It wasn't open all the way, it was just cracked open a little bit. And so the neighbor, out of fear for the wife or the mom and the kid, and potentially the husband, called the police and said, hey, listen, I don't know what's going on, but my neighbor's door's open. There's been a few robberies in the neighborhood. Can someone come out and just check the status of the family? I'm not sure how far they've gone into this with criminal justice, but there are certain times when you can go into a house if there's a fear of bodily harm, or certainly if you're like my mom years ago was older and was pregnant, and my buddy knew about it, and the fire department actually, the alarm went off, the police were there. My friend who's on the fire department knew my mom was pregnant and told the police officers, hey, there might be a pregnant woman in the house, the alarm's going off, something might be wrong. So they broke in to see, they broke a window to get all that to say, came back to that. No, so they went in the house to search to see if everyone was okay. Further investigation, they went in the basement and found all of this weed being grown. They backed out of the house, contacted the judge and said, hey, listen, so here's the situation. We entered the house legally to look for this. We found this weed in the basement. We need to get a search warrant to do some formal stuff. But that was a most definitely a reasonable search and seizure in that situation. The other story I will wait till tomorrow because it's a good one. And Officer Snyder knows about this one, so I might see if I can get him to come up and expand upon the story I know of.